everyone, and welcome to Criminals and Phantoms. This week we have a quick and an easy one. But before we get into that, hi Sonia.
Hi.
Sonia, how was your Christmas?
Good, good.
This is the first time we've seen you in a couple of weeks.
Yeah.
We took some breaks and we missed you on the last special edition show that we did, but we're glad to have you back. Landon wearing white, really, really showing off the polished bald head.
New year, new
It's
me.
shiny.
Yeah, you look like Mr.
Yeah.
Clean.
Good. I'm glad. I appreciate that compliment. Thank you.
You're welcome anytime, pal.
Good.
So this is a very what is this? Is this our first show of the new year, Landon?
Yes,
First
it
show of the
is.
new year, episode 8. We're talking FedEx flight 705.
705. Good job. I thought you almost said 706. I heard you.
No, I did not.
Oh yeah, you sure. So
I'm a professional, Dylan. I
This
taught
is-
you everything you know.
please. I was already a
Look,
pro.
I'm gonna get us a cigar sponsor before you do.
Well, remember, you can't name companies and you can't say numbers.
And with the rules. Yeah, the
You
rules.
will
I'm
write
just
it
saying.
down.
Yeah. He's worried about the rules, okay? With 12 people watch this show.
Five seconds ago, you just told me that I can't start the show off with a curse word because they'll demonetize us, even though we're not monetized. And now you're telling me I'm busting your balls.
Look, I'm just saying you should loosen up a little bit. Live a little.
I'm very loose. Sonia's here. I'm always loose when Sonia's around.
Dylan, I'm thinking about going to Thailand this year. You want to go with me?
Who the fuck goes to Thailand? People who touch kids go to Thailand. Normal people don't go to Thailand.
Could be a fun trip, man.
I think he wants a head job.
Yeah.
Here she goes.
Why not?
Here she goes. She's on the air now talking about hand jobs. It's been 2 minutes.
Hey, at least she's finally
Doing
coming out of her
tuggies.
shell to say it in person.
Oh, she's
Tuggies.
coming all
He
right.
totally wants
She's doing
tuggies.
tuggies. There we go. There we go.
Look,
Keep
you-
it on brand.
You can live like a king in Thailand, okay? You'll spend more on the flight there than you will the whole time you're there.
Listen, we've been over this. My big ass isn't going on any planes. Something this large should not be flying through the sky.
Come on.
Especially with the show we're talking about today. You want me to talk about this fucking show and then get on a plane? Fuck you.
All right, man. You know how many flights I've
You
taken,
never know.
and only 2 bad things have ever happened.
Oh, only two. Only two.
Right.
So this story comes to us April 7th, 1994. Landon, how old were you? Were you born? You would have been alive.
Yeah, I was 3.
Sonia was probably like 10. Sonia, how old were you?
What year was this?
This is 1994, Sonia.
Must have been 7.
7. All right, there we go. We're all. I wasn't born for another 7 years. So the FedEx flight was taking off from Memphis, and they were going to be landing in San Jose, California. And basically, a flight engineer named Auburn or Aubum. There's no R, but I've never heard the name Aubum.
I think people just don't know how to say it, or just
How
can't say it.
how do you pronounce it?
That's how I would say it, just like
You would say Aubum? Okay.
Out the
There's no in this particular. I've heard Auburn, but we'll call him Calloway. His last name is Calloway. So he's a flight engineer who worked with FedEx, and he intends to use what they call the jumper seat. Now, the jumper seat is like basically the extra seat on board for extra crew. You work for FedEx, you're allowed free flights basically to your destination, and he chose to use this flight, right? Now, he would be the first person to get onto the plane, and immediately he would start like tampering with things. Shortly thereafter, after Andy Peterson, the actual flight engineer for this flight, would get onto the plane, and he would start noticing things that seemed off to him. Like, for example, the voice recorder was turned off, but he sort of just thought it was just a coincidence, you know. So shortly thereafter, Dave Saunders, the pilot, and Dave Saunders and James Tucker, the co-pilot, get onto the plane, and they sort of exchange pleasantries with Calloway. Calloway is just in the back, near his seat, and all he has is a guitar case, and they don't think anything of it, right? They're assuming, oh, he plays guitar.
And mind you, back in these days, they wouldn't have checked flight crews' bags when they came on board.
Because you worked there, you
Right,
wouldn't think.
Right. This
you
is
wouldn't
pre
think.
9/11. I mean, things were a lot easier back then, right? So.
Which, if this is our second story about a flight, because we did BD Cooper,
Yeah.
back on the other program, and
DB Cooper.
What did I say? BD.
Yeah, you like a little bit.
All right. Listen, I'm tired. What do you want from me? So
drinking Gatorade, not Prime. F you, Logan Paul. Go ahead.
But it's funny to me, right, that the two stories are sort of alike in that sense that, like, just no heightened security measures, everything's chill, you just walk onto the plane, you know. So they don't think anything of it, right? And at this point, we sort of put together, right, that they're just going to take off. So what we would later learn as the general public is that Calloway was originally supposed to be on this flight as a worker, and his crew was over their miles of flight by like a minute or two. So they were pulled. Now his crew was a crew of 2 people besides him. So it would have been a man and a woman and him. That was his regular crew. And he got the boot, so he decided to use the jumper seat. So at this point, right, they go to take off, and everything's all well and all good. They have a pretty good takeoff, and they're in the air. And at this point, Calloway begins taking hammers, a knife, and a spear gun out of his guitar case, and just beating the shit out of everybody. Landon, how do you defend yourself in this situation?
Yeah, it's tough because you got to think, like, if you're getting attacked, if you're flying a plane, right, the only place they can come from is behind. So you're probably not going to realize it's coming until it hits you. So honestly, I think it just depends on what state of mind you're in after you've gotten face slapped with a hammer. If you can even think, because I would think on a lot of people that would go to instant concussions, or you know what I mean, like you might just pass out immediately.
From my understanding, Calloway entered the cockpit and he hit Peterson first and pretty much incapacitated him. Then he went for the co-pilot, Tucker, and then he went for the pilot last. And I mean, he was like dual wielding hammers. Like the fucking guy thought he was Thor. Right. And these guys somehow, even though they had taken like direct hammer hits to the head, they were still able to go and fight back. So what would end up happening, right, is he would leave the cab thinking that they were all like incapacitated to go get his spear gun. And when he came back, Peterson, who wasn't in his field of view, would sort of struggle with him for the gun. He picked this stuff strategically, knowing that like it's going to get burnt up in a crash. Like there is no evidence, and he is seemingly
the look like an accident. I mean, let's be real. That's what. Of
course, he wanted it. He wanted it to look like just some sort of freak accident. And we'll get more into what his motives were and why. Like, why does someone who was a pilot, who's now a flight engineer, why does someone who seems to have all their ducks in a row lose their mind seemingly out of the blue and attack 3 random people? It's also important to note this was this crew's first time all together. Some of them knew of each other, like they knew who each other were, but they never worked with each other, but none of them knew who Calloway was. So they're having this scuffle for this gun, and Tucker, who is the co-pilot, was also a fighter pilot, and he begins maneuvering.
Just to clarify with people, spear gun, not a real gun.
He begins maneuvering the plane in such a way that like these guys are just flying around in the cab of the plane. Now he doesn't know who's winning and who's losing, but what we know is that like there's an intense battle happening in the back of this plane. So the pilot Saunders also goes back, and these guys are all like, they're weak at this point and they're losing a lot of blood. We're not even a minute into the fight. The whole trip only lasted 30 minutes. What I'm explaining to you is all within the course of like the first 30 seconds. This is how quick these guys would act, right? So Tucker would start maneuvering the plane, trying to give them the upper hand. And at this point, the crew would take control of Callaway for the first time. And Tucker was able to make a mayday call to the Memphis, what do they call that? Air control?
Air traffic control.
And basically what he asked for is he asked for an ambulance and he asked for the police, but he specifically said, we need the police to board as soon as we land. We don't have the strength to fight back. And he had explained what the situation was. And it was actually pretty, like, he was very calm in what he was explaining to them, that like, hey, we're under attack. This is what we need. And they didn't know if everything was under control. All they knew is that they could see the plane on the radar, and it looked like they were just out of control, all over. So the fighting is becoming super intense in the back, and they ask Tucker for help. So they're asking the person who is piloting the ship, can you help us? And he, after doing invasive dives, invasive rolls, does put the plane in autopilot and goes back to help them get the upper hand. Now, this plane is not meant for evasive maneuvers. It's not meant to be doing rolls. It's not meant to be doing flips. It's not meant to be doing dives. It's been said that they did push this plane to the absolute wit's end. Tucker would say that he almost hit something called not Mach speed, but Mach tuck. And Mach tuck is when, like, the flappers don't assist you anymore, is pretty much my understanding. Like, you're in such a free fall, basically, that your flappers are destroyed. I'm sure there's a word for that.
It's the wing on the tail that determines where the plane is oriented, up or down.
Yes, please, Mr. Military, explain to me the parts of a plane, because I have no fucking idea. It's the flappers.
You be able to pull out of a dive or to dip if you need to.
And these planes aren't made for that.
No, they're cargo planes, for God's sake.
There you go. So these planes were only meant to be going about 600 kilometers. They were going like 9. For those of you who know what that means, right?
Yeah, I heard one interview with one of these guys. And he said he could see like the needle was pegged out and not going any. It couldn't go any further. That's how far past recommendation speed they were. You
people all just watched a movie to give you the source for this show.
I mean, hey, wouldn't you want to hear it directly from the people that survived it? You know,
I watched it too, but that isn't where I got my writing from. Yes, they call it the barber pole, and that is when the needle has maxed out. It's called the barber pole. So
flapper wings, he said.
While you didn't know what the barber pole was, asshole. What do you want? So while this whole thing was happening, right, we're still having this immense struggle in the back. Tucker puts the plane in autopilot. He goes back and he helps to subdue Callaway, but he's paralyzed in one side of his body. He can barely move, and he can't feel. He has no idea if he's even holding anything because he can't feel. And he's probably, even though he's the person who's been in charge of the plane, he's probably right now the weakest person. So Tucker and Saunders, who is the pilot, switch positions. Basically, in these types of situations, the pilot is supposed to land the plane. They don't like the co-pilot doing it, I guess. It's like one of those, the captain goes down with the ships kind of deal.
Right. Right.
So they switch places. So Tucker's holding Calloway down literally just with dead weight, like he's laying on him. And Calloway is still struggling to try to get free. And he actually does get possession of a hammer and he just starts like whacking. And Peterson, who is very badly damaged, has the most blood loss, gets the hammer in his hands, and he's told, "You need to hit this man." And he doesn't. He just freezes. He doesn't do anything. And Saunders is talking to air traffic control at this point, and he's saying like, "Hey, we're gonna be on our way back to the airport. Like, I think that the situation's under control, but I'm not sure." And at this point, right, he hears the battle just as loud as he said it was just as loud as when he was a part of it. And he goes to put the plane in autopilot and go help with the fight. Landon, once again, what do you do in this situation? Like, these guys are gonna fucking either crash this plane and everyone dies, or they have to fight.
Hey, look,
What do you do?
the most interesting thing to me and the smartest thing to me in this whole situation is that they were actually using the plane as a weapon against this guy, right?
Yeah.
Doing incredible moves with this plane to throw them all around and try to beat him up, knowing good and well like his buddies are part of that too. They're just as susceptible to getting hurt by flipping around and stuff.
Well,
But you got to think, if you're one guy who's paralyzed on one side, I mean, do what you can, like.
and so yeah, I mean, these guys did do what they could do, and so they get close to the airport and they realize that they can't land where the air traffic support is telling them to land. And so Saunders now has to make a maneuver that is another nearly impossible maneuver. And the best way that I can describe it is basically he has to make a K-turn in the sky.
Right.
And that type of force normally would destroy this ship. And miraculously, they didn't. But now the issue is they're still going super fast, and they feel like, hey, the second we land, our tires are going to blow out and we're just going to be stranded here on the track, right? We're going to take out everything. And once again, miraculously, a true feat, the plane survived the landing.
Well,
That
Sanders wanted to kind of let go, like lose some gas to make it work. But he couldn't let it.
He wanted to hit the fuel like X drop button basically, but he couldn't do it. Being in the pilot's seat, right? He would have to go to the engineer's seat to do that, and it isn't reliable. He couldn't do it. So good job, Sonia. Good catch. Look at Sonia, always at the small details. Yeah. That's what Sonia's
doing right now. Look at her.
Look how
she drank her hot tea this morning.
Listen. I told you it's because she woke up 25 minutes ago, and she's so happy right now. This is the happiest I've ever seen Sonia. She's so alert. She's so happy. Sonia's always laughing and having a good time. So. At this point, they land the plane and they open up the door where like the big slide thing is, and the police and paramedics are trying to climb the slide, but they're sliding down because there's like this powder that they use, so it's non-stick. So they basically end up putting a ladder on top of the slidey slide and climbing it, but the ladder is positioned in such a way that like it's this way, like it's not like straight up and down, it's not stable, and only one paramedic is able to get in. So the first paramedic gets in and he's immediately looking at everyone's wounds, and they throw him up some handcuffs. So he handcuffs Calloway and tells the pilot Saunders to stand on the handcuffs. And this whole time, right, Calloway's still putting up a fight, but they get Peterson off because Peterson's at this point the most damaged person on the plane. Even though Tucker is literally missing a piece of his skull and there are fragments of skull in his dome piece, he's still better off than Peterson, who had taken 3 or 4 good hammer blows to the head. And by the way, Captain Saunders also took 3 or 4 good hammer shots to the head, but he's the only person.
Look into the left eye because it was
Yeah,
bleeding so much.
he was yeah, he couldn't see out of his eye because he was impaired by blood. But he is the only person who was able to walk out of the plane himself. Like, he had the strength to at least walk. And so you can actually look up like the photos from this incident, and it is just as brutal, if not more brutal, as I've been describing it to you guys. I mean, I don't know if you're getting the idea of how bloody the scene was, but if you look up some of the pictures,
all the blood was on the roof of the
plane,
there was everywhere.
Everybody was covered in blood. There was blood all over the plane. There were papers everywhere. There were like random articles of clothing everywhere. It looked like a tornado had gone through and just destroyed this plane. And so they were able to get Calloway arrested, and all 4 of these guys would be rushed to a nearby medical facility, and miraculously they all survived.
Yeah.
Landon, that to me is the craziest part of this story, is that normally there's at least one guy who just didn't make it.
Right. I mean, especially with how rough some of those injuries were, like, it's quite amazing, actually. Got very lucky.
And unfortunately for these men, none of them would be allowed to get on a plane as a part of a crew again. They don't pass the physicals, which is a bummer. I mean, this was a lifelong passion for all 3 of these men, and that's the part of the story that's a real bummer. Is when you realize, like, hearing all these guys give their interviews, and you guys watch the documentary thing where they talk, like, they all still want to do it. Like, they all still want to be on a plane, and it's like, man, what a fucking sad turn of events.
Yeah, that's life, though. You always want the one thing you can't have, right?
Yeah.
But I promise you, each one of them got a massive payout. So,
yeah,
for sure, they're fine without flying their planes again.
Oh, I'm sure they did. So Calloway, basically, we don't fully know his reason for doing it, because on trial he basically went for an insanity plea, and the jury quickly said, nah, fuck that noise. The reason that we believe he did this is that he had recently been divorced, where his marriage had broken apart, and he was being brought up like with the flight board commission, because it seemed like he had lied about his flight hours. And basically, they were going to take away his wings, so to speak. No pun intended, as they say.
He essentially did something that they would have never hired him in the beginning, because he did that.
Yeah. Even though he was a pilot, they said, I think he was a pilot for 4 or 5 years. And even though he had experience, he wouldn't have been hired on to be the flight engineer with that kind of resume. So it is said that he wanted to frame this suicide attempt, basically, in such a way that it would look like an accident, and his family would be able to cash in on all that sweet, precious insurance money.
Yeah.
And so that, to me, is like the craziest part of this story, is because, like, how are you such a smart person, but then you're like, oh, I'm going to hijack a plane and it's going to look like an accident? Because the thought process is that once he would have attacked and subdued everyone, had that happened, he was going to take control of the plane and crash it into the headquarters of FedEx.
Right.
Well, that doesn't sound like an accident. That damn sure doesn't look like an accident. That looks like a pre-planned attack, right?
But they wouldn't have any evidence. That's the thing. Is for the insurance claim, it would have been deemed an accident, which would have got him the $2 million. And it's
I I don't know though, because it's not like, look, plane, they had flown the plane away and had come back. For if he would have killed them all and taken control of the plane, he would have already been in the away direction. He would have had to have taken the plane, turned it around, and then crashed. Like, I feel like the investigators would have realized very quickly there were 4 people on this plane and all of them work for us.
Right.
So even if they wouldn't have known he was the hijacker, they would have been able to say one of these fucking guys is the hijacker.
Yeah,
like
you can't deny everybody your insurance payout because somebody that you don't know.
No, of course, but the way that it's always been framed, as far as this story goes, is that like that was his grand plan.
Right.
And like I said earlier, right, this whole flight only lasted 30 minutes. To give you an idea, the lovely made-for-TV documentary that Air Disasters did, it's on YouTube, you can look it up, is 44 minutes long. So the documentary about this event is longer than the event itself.
Right.
That, it's wild to think that like that whole fight started and pretty much ended within the first minute. It seems crazy to me to think that like he gave no buffer time. He immediately sprung into action. It was like taking hammers to people's heads.
I think he waited a few minutes, like at a certain point in the air.
From what I understand, the second he struck is when they stabilized in the air. But it wasn't like a very long period of time for them to stabilize in the air.
Hey, if he wanted to fly it back into the headquarters, I mean, he wanted to get it over quick.
Yeah.
I mean, you got to think, if you get too far away, Air Force can intervene with you and take you down before you do something.
Yeah. But I mean, would they have done that with civilians on board? That's the other thing, is, you never know. So this is 1994.
I would think going towards a FedEx facility, they wouldn't. However, if you're going to like some high security place,
well, that's what
then they'll shoot your ass down.
That's what we would think later, and then 9/11 happened. So who the fuck knows what they would have done in 1994?
Yeah. I'm not talking about 9/11.
But there again, though, when we talked about fucking DB Cooper, they had the Air Force on BD Cooper, and BD Cooper wasn't posing a risk other than he claimed he had a bomb. Like, that was the risk. This guy's beating the fuck out of people with hammers. He's bludgeoning them. You know what I'm saying? I that seems wacky to me.
Hey, it sounds to me like a story of a guy who was in a desperate situation and was willing to do whatever it took to take care of his family, whether that meant getting rid of somebody else's family, whatever the case may be. That's what it sounds like to me.
And this is what I brought up before we went on the air with Sonia. I feel like there are a lot of ways where you could potentially fake a suicide to make it look like an accident. I feel like this is like not the easiest way to go about that,
Right, but this would be the most profitable, because you got to think you're going to get the insurance payout, but you probably are going to get something from the airline too if it happens while you're at your job. See what I'm saying? If there's a loss from the families, you're getting paid out on top of the insurance.
I guess. I don't know. I don't know the logistics of all that. I don't know how the legal
I've
system.
not thought about killing myself at work or anything, but
yeah,
if I were to do it,
If you were to do it, yes.
If I did it.
It's the big if.
Yeah, Sonia's over here plotting her veterinary accident. She's gonna fall into a horse kick or some shit, like fucking just some wild shit. I'm gonna, I don't know, I guess burn in the cigar fire. I don't know how the fuck I would do it, but like, I don't know. It's to me, once again, the coolest things about this to me, and this is a shitty situation, but there are really cool things that came out of it. First off, the fact that the plane didn't fall apart is amazing. The fact that these guys had the wherewithal to start doing defensive maneuvers immediately is badass. It's a scary scene, but if I was like driving by on a freeway and saw a plane doing barrel rolls, that'd be pretty cool.
To be fair, the guy who did it was an old Air Force guy. So
yeah. Both of the pilots were Air Force guys.
Right. So that's, I mean, they're kind of
trained.
What to do. Yeah, they're trained to do that.
And then yeah, I mean, once again, everyone lived. I mean, we would hope, right, that maybe Calloway didn't live and that the crew did, but everybody did live. Calloway currently will serve 2 life sentences without the possibility of parole. He was originally in prison in California, and he is now in prison in my home state of Pennsylvania. And that's probably where he'll finish out his life. The other members that were on board, the crew, they were given, I don't remember what the award was called. Sonia has a cat on her lap. I just saw it.
Okay,
I just saw a
blanket. Never mind.
I saw a tail poke up because I thought it was a blanket too, and then I see a tail and I go, "Oh, that's a cat," because he looks so soft.
Yeah.
Sorry, everyone. So they were given the highest honor for like pilots, which is kind of a nice thing. And like Landon said, I'm sure that they got a huge payout. Like, I'm sure that those guys don't have to work ever again.
Right.
But the fact that like there's one of them literally missing a giant piece of his skull.
But they did replace it for something.
Yeah, they have like, I don't know, it's some sort of like thingy.
Prosthetic. It's some sort of prosthetic.
Yeah, and it covers up the hole perfectly. And the other 2 guys, I mean, even though Peterson at the time was the most damaged, in the modern day, he seems to be the most unscathed, which is kind of crazy to think about. I guess most of his injuries were blood loss related, not like missing brain and whatnot.
Right.
And Saunders, the pilot, like he was pretty bummed when he talked about it, because he said like he always thought he was going to overcome all this shit and fly again, and he's bummed that he can't. And it's just like, that was a very sad part of the interviews that they've done, is that like, I know Landon said they don't need the money or anything, but I mean, imagine, you know, if you just really liked something and you really wanted to do it.
Even Tucker, he was like, every time he sees a plane fly by, he's like, I wonder where they're going.
Yeah, and Tucker was just the flight engineer. Like, he was the flight engineer, and he's like, man, anytime I see a plane, like, I just think like endless possibilities. Like, the 3 nicest guys in the world survived a horrific hijacking in the sky, fought like hell, and won. They won. Well, I think with that, everyone, we're going to bring this show to an end. We'll end this show the same way we end every show, with final thoughts. Landon?
Wait. Before we do this, before the show, Dylan told me there's conspiracy theories here, and he did not talk about a single one. So I want to hear about it, because I couldn't find any.
So the big sort of conspiracy theory is exactly, I mean, it was the whole thing that this wasn't a planned suicide, that this was a planned terror attack. That is in itself the conspiracy theory. So I know it's not exactly one of your regular, like, oh, the devil told him to do it. But the fact that there are people who believe it was a suicide attempt and that's it, whereas other people do believe that it was a planned terrorist attack.
Yeah.
So
see, this is one time I will not be on the side of the conspiracy theory. I think he would have brought a gun with him for sure if he was going to plan something. He wouldn't have cared if there was a bullet.
Wow. See, we're on the opposite side of the spectrum here.
If it was a terrorist attack, he wouldn't care if those guys. He would just get rid of them.
But he still wanted that insurance money. And if he would have shot them, we lost Landon right in the middle of the argument. What the fuck is this, Sonia?
He's probably doesn't want to get involved.
Landon just got DDoSed. Well, I mean, I guess we do final thoughts. I don't assume Landon will come back for.
I'm not sure.
Do we wait, Sonia, or do we? Yeah, maybe he's giving up. There he is. Wow, it's a good thing we didn't. Good thing.
That's like a 1 second hand job.
Yeah, Sonia's talk about hand jobs again on air. Jesus Christ, Sonia.
Real great programming you got here, just kicking me off the air. I mean,
I didn't do it. I said you probably got DDoSed.
I'm sitting here still watching the show, and my camera just was going.
But here was my point. I think 100% he wanted that insurance money, and he wanted it to look like an accident. But I think he 100% wanted revenge against the FedEx as well. I think 100% had he gotten his hands on the controls, he would have drove that plane into the HQ. Yeah. Because here's the thing. He could have easily just have crashed it into the ground, arguably at any point when all three of the guys were injured, when they couldn't fight back. And he didn't. He went back into the cab to get the spear gun. And that to me says that this was a terror attack, not a suicide attack.
I don't know. I think I would have started with the spear gun, to be honest with you.
But you would only hit one person with that thing, so
I mean, go ahead and get it out of the way and eliminate one threat. You know,
there are parts of this story that to me
just don't make sense.
Yeah, like an example, and I hate to like victim shame. You didn't close and lock the door. Like after he had gotten out, you didn't just close the door. I don't understand that. Because like these are guys who are seemingly three really smart individuals.
I don't think they would figure that he would be doing something like that.
No. I don't mean originally. I mean after the fight had already broken out. Like they should have just all got themselves into the cab and locked the door.
Right.
Because he probably wasn't getting through.
You can't open it from the outside though.
They had it locked.
Time.
From what he said though, the engineer said he had it locked in the closed position, so I would assume you could lock it in the open position too. But I don't know. So I don't know. But yeah, there are things about this that did sort of just like bug me. But once again, the whole flight lasted 30 minutes, and sometimes, right, your adrenaline's pumping and you just don't think. But with that, Landon, are you ready for final thoughts?
Yeah. You know, here's my final thoughts. Again, sounds like a story of a desperate dude trying to do something. I think we still don't know the whole story, even what they're telling us. I mean, you got to think dude's getting busted in the head with a hammer. Probably not going to remember things correctly, you know? So I think there's a lot that's still up in the air here.
I have to interject because the reason that we know what happened, remember I had talked about how the recording thing was turned off?
Mm-hmm.
The engineer turned it back on, and those record for the first like 30 to 40 minutes of the flight. So they did hear everything on the plane once they landed.
Right. But
we do have an idea.
I'm more talking about the motives behind it.
Yeah, of course.
Rather than what actually happened. I mean, obviously, they know the basics of the story.
We know what happened on the plane. We know that shortly before this whole thing, Calloway had updated his will. We know that he had been divorced and that he had been really worried about his financials, sending his kids to Stanford or whatever. So yeah, we know that stuff.
Right.
And of course, he would go on to try to plead insanity.
I would too.
Who wouldn't?
It's a good shot. I mean, could be a free one out.
All you need is one sympathetic juror to think you're a fucking nutcase.
Because it only takes one.
Only takes one. Sonia, final thoughts?
Every time you're tempted to react in the same old way, ask yourself if you want to be a prisoner of the past or a pioneer of the future.
Sonia's final thoughts are always so like intricate and worked out ahead of time, and then there's me and Landon who just say stupid shit.
So would you prefer to be a prisoner of the past or a prisoner of the future? Because that is an interesting question.
Are you asking me or Sonia?
I
don't know. Both of you.
Go ahead, Sonia.
Pioneer of the future.
I guess I want to be a fortunate son.
Yeah, you're an old soul. You go back to the damn Western times if you could.
You know, me and Joe were talking about this. Joe said that the way that I talk sounds like an old noir movie. like the way that I put together sentences. And he started playing like fucking jazz music in the background of me talking. Like he's so, I don't know. I've never heard it, but I guess maybe.
Just go listen to Dylan's. Was on YouTube, guys. You'll
should I like go? Do you think I should start like reading books with like noir music behind me?
Why not?
I'm
give it a shot, dude.
We should do the story with noir music. Oh my god, that's what I should do every week while I'm reading. I should do it in a noir format. But
we can't have music. That would be against the rules.
Well, you can have. There's probably a copyright free. Probably here.
Look, you just need to get us an intro song. Yeah. Get us a proper intro. I'm sick of this bullshit, okay? This is an underproduced program, and we have 3 people watching, and they deserve better, Dylan. You need to pull your head out of your ass and make it happen. That's all I'm saying.
How big of a gape do you think I have that my head fits entirely up my ass, Landon? Joe messaged me. I'm going to read this. He says, I don't know about Sonya showing more face. Of course, this is a reference to past events. He says, but I think Landon should show more hair.
It's probably the longest it's been in a while. So
it is. You do. You have some of that. You have the Hulk Hogan going on. You need to get a.
Well, it's been a minute since I went out on the road, so
you need to get a Fu Manchu.
Yeah.
But
I'll get a cut this week for you. But I won't be here next week, y'all. So
yeah,
you're gonna have.
So next week we start Colts. We will be talking about Colts, and we're going to work on the schedule and see where I want to put stuff. But some of the ones that we'll have coming up definitely are Ruby Ridge and Waco, the People's Temple, and then is it Michael Wesson? Is that what the fella's name is? Marcus Wesson, and he's a vampire cult leader. Vampire cult. So it's a very interesting story. Joe's in the chat here. Thank you for watching, Joe. We love you. We care for you. Jerry apparently tuned in. So Jerry, thank you.
Oh, did he?
Well, you messaged in there that I don't know. I assume there's 3. Here's the thing. There's 3 people watching. One of them's you. One of them's Joe. The third person, we have no fucking idea who they are.
Yeah.
So either it's Jerry or it's like
Jerry can say something. And Jerry is like the worst friend. I don't think he's been here for a single show. He hasn't supported us at all.
We'll have Jerry on sometime. Well, we'll have Jerry on for Chris Benoit. Jerry would have
loved on once, didn't he?
He was on.
Well, he come,
yeah. Oh yeah, he did come on and say y'all are interrupting SmackDown. I do remember that. Yeah.
Yeah. I'm telling you, Dylan, you guys should check out. So he's talked about this temple. You can all Google it. Joe has given us some great recommendations to do, but they are some wacky shit that he and Landon are the only people who care about this shit. No one else gives a fuck. Yeah. So with that, I guess time for my final thoughts. My final thoughts are: Landon, stop being a bitch. Sonya, let your freaky flag fly. You did a good job this week talking about all the handles. Well, all right, she's. What the fuck is happening over?
What was that? Did she just lift her kilt or something? Like, what the fuck was that?
I think it was the cat. I don't know. And with that, everyone, we thank you for joining us.